You're listening to Curious Cat, the podcast that examines the shadowy space where science and the supernatural collide. I'm your host, Jennifer Holtz. Join me every week as I explore what it means to be a soul in a meat suit. Welcome to Curious Cat. This week, we are venturing on the East Coast of the United States, and next week to the West. Because as I researched incidents of high strangeness on Florida's Space Coast, I found a geolocation full of weirdness in California's Space Pocket. And yes, I did just make that nickname up. The location in California is north of Santa Barbara, west of Purisma Mission, and near a famous spot for split pea soup. But enough about teasing next week. This week, our journey takes us to the east coast of Florida, best known as the site of rocket launches and a space shuttle tragedy. There's more to this stretch of land than the soft sands and salty blue waters and space travel, though. It's a place of a race-fueled double murder that we need to remember. A waterlogged ancient cemetery that is rewriting how we think of prehistoric communities, and much more. Let's get into it. Just north of Titusville, a stone's throw from the Indian River and Charles Bronson Nature Preserve, lies a distinguished home. It's a replica because the original was bombed by the KKK on Christmas 1951. The couple that slept inside were civil rights heroes, Harry T. and Harriet Moore. They were celebrating their 25th anniversary. Harry's mother and their eldest daughter were also asleep in the house that night, and they miraculously survived the bombing. Almost 75 years later, their great-great-grandson wants us to remember their work more than this hateful act. But I say with huge respect that we need to know both. I was in this area a week ago, 15 minutes away from this home, and I saw not one, but two Confederate flags. We need to know who the Moors were and remember their lives and legacy and speak out against racism in all forms. This sobering account comes from NAACP. Find links to this important organization in the show notes and give them some support for their work. Harry T. and Harriet Moore, active in the civil rights movement, paid the ultimate price for the freedoms won for their community when they were killed by Ku Klux Klan members in their own home in 1951. By the time of their death, Florida had the highest number of registered Black voters, far more than any other southern state, and this is part of the Moors' legacy. Born in the Florida Panhandle, Harry was sent to live with his three aunts in Jacksonville, home to a large and vibrant Black community. His aunts, two of them teachers, nurtured his love of learning, and the few years Harry spent with them would provide pivotal to his racial and political awakening. After graduating from high school, Harry became a fourth grade teacher at a Black elementary school in Brevard County. There he met Harrietta Vida Sims, a former school teacher who was selling life insurance. After marrying, the couple completed their college education at Bethune-Cookman College, a historically Black university, and eventually returned to teaching. In 1934, the Moors founded a chapter of the NAACP in Brevard County. Initially, Harry kept his job as a teacher, working in an unpaid capacity for NAACP for more than a decade. He fought tirelessly for equal rights for Black Floridians by investigating lynchings, challenging barriers to voter registration, and advocating for equal pay for Black teachers in public schools despite segregation. Harry and Harriet were eventually fired from their teaching jobs because of their activism, at which point Harry became a paid organizer. Eventually, Harry was appointed executive secretary for the Florida NAACP. During his tenure at the helm of the Florida branch, statewide membership grew to a peak of 10,000 members in its 63 branches. In 1944, Moore formed the Florida Progressive Voters League and became its executive director. The league was instrumental in helping register over 100,000 Black voters in the state of Florida. Moore also served as a forceful advocate against racial violence and lynchings in Florida. His efforts to bring attention to the lynching of the African-American teenager Willie James Howard in 1944 and to the miscarriage of justice in the Groveland rape case in 1949 are vivid examples of his activism on this front. Moore's vocal criticism of the failures of the criminal justice system, especially the ineptitude and complicity of law enforcement and the racism that permeated the courts, offered a much-needed critique of the tragic intersection of Jim Crow and civil rights violations. 6 weeks later, on Christmas night, a bomb exploded under the bed of Harry and Harriet Moore. It was the couple's 25th anniversary, the first ever NAACP official to be assassinated. Harry died on the way to the hospital, while Harriet died in the hospital 9 days later. Despite a nationwide outcry calling the double murder the bomb heard round the world and a massive FBI investigation, no one was arrested for the couple's killing. It took more than a half century before the case was reopened and 4 KKK members were identified as being directly involved in the murders. Langston Hughes composed a poem titled The Ballad of Harry Moore in the wake of the couple's death. And in 1952, NAACP awarded Harry the Spring Iron Medal for Outstanding Achievement by an African American. After the initial outcry, the couple's story faded from history for a few decades, but interest in their lives enjoyed a revival in the 21st century. Several landmarks in Brevard County bear their name, including a park, a justice center, a highway, and a post office. Their home was also declared a Florida Heritage Landmark. A replica of their home now stands in the place on the very site of their original home. The interior is designed to look the same way it did on that tragic day of the bombing, decorated for Christmas. The story of the Moores needs sharing over and over. The plight of Harry T. Moore and Harriet V. Moore and their roles in drawing state and federal attention to injustices and inequalities will never be forgotten. I've put links to the museum and cultural center in the show notes. Be sure to give it a click and explore their lives and legacy there. You can even donate if you feel compelled. My own side note here, I've noticed a trend on socials that I find disturbing. Mind you, my algorithms show comedian snips, ancient artifacts, art history, meditation tips, and cat videos. But in spite of that, lately my feeds everywhere are littered with awful posts trying to get me riled up about some group or another, and it makes me sick, those attempts. I do not know the source of that manipulation, but I think of how that Facebook AI experiment had to be shut down in a matter of minutes because quickly AI turned to racist and sexist rants. Our country is what's been called a beacon on the hill because we are this gorgeous intersection of cultures and ethnicities and genders and skin tones as varied as colors of loamy soil. Our diversity is our national treasure, and I am sick to think anyone or anything would try to turn that against us. The pushback begins with education. It happens in little actions like blocking race-baiting posts and tweets, and it heals by recognizing the God in each and every person we encounter, whether online, at work, doing errands, or shopping for food. I know you are a shining light already. I do. I'm just ranting. Maybe what we can do is remember civil rights heroes like Harry T. and Harriet Moore and carry their stories with us like arrows in a quiver to help fight against ignorance. After an early break, I'll share some of the strangest facts about Florida's Space Coast and go in depth about a bog burial that's rendering history books obsolete. Back in a minute.
Many people are unaware just how much hypnotherapy can help them, or think it's only to help lose weight or quit smoking. But there is so much more hypnotherapy can do. It can help with stress, anxiety, insomnia, phobias, performance enhancement, connecting with your spirit guides and higher self. You can even discover past lives and your life between lives. Heal traumas, break habits, find your deepest truth, or just have fun discovering who you really are, all from the comfort of your home. I'm Monique Pliakis. I'm a certified hypnotherapist, and I want to help you. Schedule a free consult by going to www.innerstandingshypnosis.com. That's INNERSTANDINGSHYPNOSIS.com. Innerstandings Hypnosis. Find your power and ignite your inner light.
Welcome back. Hey, if it sounds a little echoey this week, you're not imagining it. I've got a bathroom door nearby open because right now we're in the middle of a baby gecko rescue mission. I don't know how it happened, but a baby gecko ended up coming in under a door or a window. And so I've got this plant on the ground. I set it on the ground hoping that the gecko will see that, because otherwise he's just been hiding out underneath the bathroom vanity. So I apologize for the echo. Florida's Space Coast geology is unique. It's strange and interesting. Due to its geological makeup, far different than what's found only miles away, this land actually prevents sinkholes. Are you wondering why? So was I. Did research and found out the Space Coast has no sinkholes because its young, thin, and limited limestone deposits lack the depth and age necessary for the dissolution process that creates sinkholes in other parts of Florida. Okay, so in contrast, regions like Central Florida's Sinkhole Alley have ancient, thick limestone beds that have been eroding over millions of years, forming vast underground caverns that can eventually collapse and cause sinkholes. Unrelated, but a fun fact still, the Canaveral National Seashore is a stretch of 24 miles of undeveloped beach, the longest in Florida. It's no wonder 3 of the world's 7 turtle species nest on these beaches. There are other instances of high strangeness on Florida's Space Coast. There's the Melbourne bone bed. The Space Coast's strange history includes the discovery of a prehistoric Melbourne bone bed with mammoths and mastodons. Around 1930, fossils of mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant ground sloths from 10,000 to 20,000 years ago were discovered in a significant archaeological site in Melbourne, known as the Melbourne bone bed. I've not visited there yet, but I really want to. Here's an interesting fact. The last naval battle of the American Revolutionary War occurred offshore of Cape Canaveral in 1783. And then there's the Ashley Gang. No, it's not a group of blonde women attacking you with blow dryers, making sure your hair is straight. Around the 1920s, the infamous outlaw Ashley Gang, led by the Ashley brothers, terrorized the Space Coast with blood and lawlessness. They were known outlaws and rum runners, not exactly pirates, but landlocked. And coming a century or so after those swashbucklers, the Ashley Gang perpetrated crimes up and down Florida. Crimes like bank robberies to train heists to moonshining. Some sources describe them as a, quote, notorious gang of desperados, which I'd call romanticizing, and now the Eagles are singing in my head. Oh, by the way, one brother, John Ashley, lost his eye during a bank robbery. How romantic. Legend has it that the Ashleys stashed considerable wealth here and there, but significant portions were never located. So get out your metal detectors, folks. During World War II, German U-boats attacked ships off what is now the Space Coast, leading to a period of intense warfare and, uniquely, the reported salvage of a ship carrying thousands of cases of Johnny Walker Scotch. At the time, residents had to black out their windows to avoid illumination that the U-boats could detect. Here's a few other cultural impacts of Space Coast and an odd bit. In the 1970s, Merritt Island NASA engineer Adam Cassatt invented the electronic digital hearing aid, which became the basis for the cochlear implant, giving hearing to deaf people worldwide. Then there are the UFO sightings. The region's association with space has led to numerous UFO sightings and local legends, with reports of strange lights and objects over the decades. Oh, and also, it's interesting if you watched any of Shark Week this year, and if you didn't, what's wrong with you? You will know the name New Smyrna Beach because it is the shark attack capital of the world. The Space Coast is home to the renowned Windover Archaeological Site near Titusville, where 168 plus ancient human remains were discovered. A quick note though, there are likely many more bodies buried in this bog. Scientists decided to keep half of the site intact under the peat, so future archaeologists with more advanced technology can one day unearth the remains and learn even more. They are known as the Windover Bog bodies and were found preserved in a peat bog dating back 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. That's more than 2,000 years older than the Egyptian pyramids. Some professors are saying actually the bodies could date back 3,500 years before the Egyptian pyramids were built. This site is significant for the exceptional preservation of not only bones, but also brain tissue, stomach contents, and artifacts like the oldest woven fabric in the Western Hemisphere, providing invaluable insights into a prehistoric Native American community. Here's more about that initial discovery. In 1982, a backhoe operator was prepping land for the construction of a housing development when he discovered a human skull at Windover Pond. He stopped his work and went to his stepfather's restaurant carrying his bucket of bone fragments and skull, thinking he could have found the remains of, a murder victim? But this was an even more dramatic find. One of 168 ancient people from a civilization unknown before that moment. Here's the moment of discovery in living color thanks to Orange County Regional History Center's blog. Quote, "It was a warm spring day in 1982 when backhoe operator Steve Vanderjagt paused to examine a pale rock he had uncovered while working construction near the edge of a pond at Windover Farms in Brevard County, Florida. Turning the object over in his hands, Vanderjagt saw 2 eye sockets and realized he was holding a human skull. His first thought was, oh shit. What Vanderjagt did not know at the time was that he had stumbled across a prehistoric cemetery that would prove to be one of the most amazing archaeological discoveries of the 20th century. Not knowing whom to contact, Swan walked the remains over to a nearby Florida Highway Patrol station. According to Swan, archaeologist Rachel Wentz later wrote in her book Life and Death at Wendover, they were met with a chilly reception. The troopers took one look at the skeletons and said, "We only do car wrecks." Then the county coroner checked out the finds and reported they were ancient remains, not those of modern humans, and because of that, they were of little value to law enforcement. Swan had to fight for them to be returned to him, which he did. When he did get them back, the remains resided in Swan's garage, then in the tiny trailer on the Wendover Farms construction site, where workers repeatedly stubbed their toes on the large containers. But Swan was intrigued by what else might be hidden beneath the layers of pond muck, and that would have remained a mystery if not for Swan's next decision: to call in archaeologist Glenn Doran, a professor at Tallahassee's Florida State University. The peat bog provided the perfect conditions to preserve the bodies because it is an oxygen-poor environment, or what is called anaerobic, and pH neutral, which does a great job of basically choking off bacteria that would otherwise have eaten away soft tissue, brain matter, and the contents of the deceased stomachs, and also that fabric. Most people think of Europe when they hear the term bog burial. These are burials in ponds in Europe that date from the Iron and Bronze Ages. A few sites there made the concept famous. The bodies have been most commonly found in the northern European countries of Denmark, Germany, and the Netherlands, United Kingdom, and also Ireland. Reports of bog bodies surfaced during the early 18th century, and some of the most famous bog finds from Europe include Lundman from Denmark. This is a remarkably well-preserved Iron Age man with a noose around his neck. Then there's Lindo Man from the UK, one of the most famous bog bodies, found in the UK and now housed in the British Museum. Then there's the Grauballe Man from Denmark, another exceptionally preserved figure known for his intact hair. His skin was found in Denmark. Again, the peat bog's anaerobic or oxygen-poor environment slowed decomposition, and it exceptionally preserved the bodies. Florida's Wendover site is thousands of years older than any of the European bog burials. And Wendover is significant for other reasons as well. The site revealed a community graveyard of ancient indigenous people from the Middle Archaic period. Yeah, you heard that right. Community, as in a group of people that lived together, traveled together, rejoiced, and grieved together. This isn't a word normally associated with ancient groups of people because if your prehistoric lessons were like mine as a kid, they claimed ancient people were nomadic, all the time on the move. They were living off the land, and they were also violent, not working together but in constant competition. Wendover discoveries are helping people broaden and in many cases dramatically correct the record. They lived in community. But wait, there's more, thanks to the exceptional preservation of their soft tissue. I want to return to the soft tissue they found intact. They didn't know what it was at first. Here's a story about that from the Orange County Regional History Center. Toward the end of the first field season, Doran and Dickel, and by the way, both of those men headed up the efforts, and they both originated at UC Davis. But Doran and Dickel made an astonishing discovery, a mushy, greasy, tan substance inside one of the skulls. Speculating on what the material might be, Doran joked that maybe it was only snail poop, but doctors at the University of Florida's Shands Medical Center soon confirmed that a sample was actually human brain tissue. By the end of that year, several intact brains had been recovered. Though shrunken to a quarter of their original size, they still retain the shape and surface features of a typical brain. According to Wentz, an editorial in a local paper ran the headline, "Brains Finally Discovered in Titusville." Though these were not the first ancient skulls found with preserved brain matter, this was the first time such a discovery coincided with advances in technology that would allow researchers to analyze the tissue on a molecular level. To ensure the preservation of the brain matter for future study, it was removed from the skulls in the field, sealed in nitrogen-filled containers at -4 degrees Fahrenheit, and transferred to the lab at the University of Florida, where the containers were frozen at -94 degrees. By comparing the DNA in these tissues with the genetic sequences of other populations, particularly mitochondrial DNA, which is passed down maternally, and Y chromosome DNA, which is passed down paternally, it is possible to trace the history of human migration. While researchers have determined that DNA did survive in the brain tissue, the samples are still extremely fragile. Instead, an analysis of DNA extracted from the skeletal remains has yielded the most interesting results. Conducted decades after the excavation, the study revealed that the people buried at Wendover migrated to North America from Asia, but do not seem to be related to any living Native American tribes or to any known prehistoric people. This leaves one of two possibilities, they write. Either their descendants died out, or their population bottlenecked or was reduced sharply before the genetic markers we find in modern humans evolved. The exceptional preservation allowed for DNA analysis and detailed study of the ancient inhabitants' diet, health, and social structures. They were able to see what different people ate as their last meal, and the results? Okay, they showed a sophistication thought impossible in ancient people, but more on that in a sec. The site yielded artifacts such as bone needles and the oldest woven fabric ever found in the Western Hemisphere, offering a rare glimpse into the daily lives of these prehistoric communities. Remember that crude, one-dimensional take I was talking about on ancient people of the Americas? Well, violent nomads, they're not weaving cloth. That's artistry that takes collecting and processing and dyeing materials suitable for weaving. It demands high levels of thinking and planning and execution to twist and sort and weave and bind materials into fabric. They have been said by fabric specialists to be the most complex textiles in the New World. Dr. Glenn H. Doran, again one of the co-leads of the project from Florida State, also noted in an extended interview that they found bottle gourds used as vessels, which pushed back the archaeological timeline on that by 3,000 years. That bottle gourd, by the way, is proof that this community was at least semi-domesticate, because growing that crop specifically requires human intervention, which to us non-academics means intention and direction. Us humans have to plant, help pollinate, and nurture bottle gourds for them to grow. If you heard a crashing sound in the background, that wasn't Cooper knocking over my stack of books. That was the crashing of those stale narratives once and for all. But just you wait. I haven't even shared the most shocking information yet. Remember I mentioned that some of the stomach contents were found intact? Analysis revealed their diet consisted of fish and berries. From ancientorigins.net comes this detail as well. Quote, one woman, perhaps 35 years old, was found with a concoction of elderberry, nightshade, and holly in the area where her stomach should have been, suggesting that she was eating medicinal herbs to try and combat an illness, end quote. Paleobotanists identified 30 species of edible and or medicinal plants, but small fruits and berries were particularly important to this community's diet. Scientists tend to disagree about whether this group moved around or stayed put, finding safety in settlement together. Most lean that direction due to their advancements in tool making, medicines, textiles, and more. Their lifestyle also included using plants and other substances as medicines, as I mentioned. But what did their brain tissue reveal about the community? It revealed that they made burying their dead a priority, and they did so quickly. Yeah, apparently intact brain matter means a person was buried within 48 hours of death, a critical factor in the hot Florida climate. That speaks volumes, doesn't it? But this isn't the part that leaves the old stale crap I learned about in school in the dust. It helps for sure, but it's what the bones of a disabled boy revealed that blows that ignorant narrative to bits. Okay, here it is. Enough teasing. My favorite discovery from the Wendover archaeology site is that of a 15-year-old boy who suffered in life from spina bifida, most likely physically challenged since birth and paralyzed from the waist down. He needed constant care to survive, which he had thanks to the people of this community. They nurtured him until his death at 15 years old, which scientists sleuth was due to a bone infection. I love that this evidence holds the real truth and paints a richer picture of those that lived and died before us, of a people that took care of their living and dead with compassion. There were also the bones of a woman in her 50s found that evidenced many breaks over time and healing. Her condition would have made her dependent on the community members to heal and survive, which the bones showed happened. DNA analysis has provided information about the genetic makeup of these ancient people, showing they were not biologically related to more modern Native American groups in the area. Or I have to put a little footnote there. They could be that they dissolved into, became a part of these Native American groups that we know better from the Florida area. Also, remarkably, some lived to be around 70 years old. Think of the Spanish that came to this land thousands of years after this community lived and died on this stretch of coastland. The Spanish at that time lived to be around, 45 years old? Living to an average age of 70 was no small feat. Imagine doing it 7,000 to 8,000 years ago. Here's some more from Orange County Regional History Center. Despite the remarkable discovery of the intact brain matter, Doran and Dickel were initially disappointed by the results of their excavation. The finds uncovered during the first two field seasons in 84 and 85 were either too commingled or too isolated to draw many conclusions. But during the third and final field season in 86, as the team began digging in the northern part of the pond, they suddenly started finding undisturbed burials with distinct, nearly complete skeletons. This, Wentz writes, is when the graves began to speak. The story they tell begins 9,000 years ago when ancient humans began using Wendover as a cemetery. The indigenous people buried their dead in the pond, and we can tell from the level of decomposition that the bodies were interred within 48 hours after death. The bodies were tucked into a flexible position. Some call it the fetal position, bundled in fabric along with a variety of grave goods and submerged beneath the water, typically on their left sides, facing west. Wooden stakes driven through the cloth kept them anchored to the bottom of the pond. Generation after generation returned to the pond to bury their dead in this manner for the next 1,000 years. Life in prehistoric Florida was not easy. The bones at Wendover show signs of numerous ailments, including disease, broken bones, and malnutrition. The high level of grit in their diet, caused by using stone tools and surfaces to prepare food, combined with the use of their teeth as tools, had worn their teeth down to nubs. Arthritis and abscesses were common. It makes sense then that several were found with large quantities of plant seeds, known known to have pain-relieving properties in their stomach region, potentially representing the first archaeological evidence of the medicinal use of plants. The people of Wendover probably also splinted broken bones, performed amputations, and cared for their sick and elderly. Only one skeleton showed signs of violence, a young man with an antler tine embedded in his hip and a missing skull. The artifacts buried with the bodies can tell us just as much as the remains themselves. In addition to a variety of wooden artifacts, archaeologists recovered 119 objects made from animal parts, many of which would have been used as tools to fish, hunt, and butcher meat. Deer antler was used to make projectile points and barbed fishing hooks. Scrapers and other tools were made from the teeth of sharks, opossums, and canids, which include mammals in the dog family. Containers made of turtle shell, too small for use in cooking food, were possibly used to prepare medicinal plants. In one burial, archaeologists also found a bottle gourd that may have been used as a container. The oldest known example of a bottle gourd north of Mexico, this find may support the theory that some of the earliest cultivated plants in the New World were not sources of food, but utilitarian plants that provided light, durable containers and tools. Though very few stone artifacts were found, the points that were recovered can be traced to quarries in Sumter County, more than 80 miles away. AncientOrigins.net added this detail. Some children were buried with toy-like objects wrapped inside their arms. In addition, owls, perforators, punches, and pins made from animal bones and antler would have been used in the preparation of hides, baskets, cordage, clothing, and other fabrics. Remarkably, 87 fragments of these hand-woven palm fiber textiles survived. Extremely fragile and nearly indistinguishable from the surrounding peat, the cloth had to be removed with the entire burial in a single large block and transported back to the lab where specialists in preserving ancient fiber worked to carefully extract and conserve them. Although their production and use certainly predate Wendover, these woven textiles represent the oldest surviving examples of this type in the New World. Not all of the grave goods had a utilitarian purpose, though. 3 necklaces adorn the neck of a woman in her early 20s, each made from a different material: fish vertebrae, sable palm seeds, and shells. 2 more were found draped over a 2-year-old child. To recap just a bit, the Wendover people, and that is not the name they gave themselves. I'm simply using it as an indication of where they lived in present terms. They were an organized society that began to bury their dead in this pond about 9,000 years ago and continued to do so for at least 1,000 years. Okay, that just blows my mind. How old is the oldest cemetery in your town? 200 years old? That's a quarter of the time the Wendover were burying their dead in the pond cemetery. They nurtured all the people of their community, living and dead. They used tools, made medicine, made jewelry and clothing, and had challenging lives which showed up in their teeth and bones. These were a beautiful, artistic people, and that image alone obliterates the knuckle-dragging stereotypes we are steadily fed in every form on all types of media. R.I.P. old crappy stereotypes, R.I.P. The Wendover Archaeological Site is a protected National Historic Landmark due to its unique archaeological importance. There is a humble marker at the site, but it is privately held, so those that remain beneath the peat can rest in peace. If you want to see some of the Wendover discoveries, your best bet is to visit the Brevard County Museum. They even have a recreation of how the bog site looked during the archaeological dig. Recognizing the limitations of modern technology, about half of the Wendover site was left intact as a protected National Historical Landmark, so that in 50 or 100 years, researchers can return to the bog and excavate untouched remains. As remarkable as Wendover is, there are other what are known as wet site archaeology in Florida. Wet sites have yielded some of the most spectacular archaeological finds in the world. Prior to Wendover's discovery, ancient human remains had been uncovered at 4 other in Florida: Little Salt Springs in Sarasota County, Warm Mineral Springs in Sarasota County, Republic Groves in Hardy County, and Bay West in Collier County. Known as mortuary ponds, these sites served as cemeteries during the early and middle Archaic periods, roughly 10,000 to 5,000 years ago. These burials were preserved because of the remarkable properties of the substance in which they were submerged, that peat, made up of layer upon layer of decomposing organic materials, mainly vegetation. Peat provided an oxygen and acid-free environment that allowed bones and artifacts to survive for thousands of years. However, as soon as those materials were excavated and exposed to the air, they began to decompose rapidly. This is one of many factors that make wet site archaeology really challenging, very slow, and very expensive. Doran recruited an old friend from college that I mentioned, archaeologist Dave Dickel. They designed a demucking system that would remove enough water to excavate, but not too much. It was essential that the peat stay moist to protect the materials buried within. Over the course of 3 field seasons that I mentioned, 84, 85, and 86, Doran and Dickel perfected the process. They installed 158 well points around the edge of the pond to capture water from both the top and bottom of the pond and eject it away from the site, creating an excavation area about the size of an Olympic swimming pool. Digging in peat was not like digging in soil. The peat had this clay-like consistency that had to be sliced using sharpened trowels and shovels. Thin layers were slowly shaved away until the peat changed color, a sign that archaeologists were nearing a burial. Then wooden tools were used to gently scrape the muck away from the remains. Chopsticks that the archaeologists hoarded from nearby Chinese restaurants worked best. However, their most important tool was water. Bones can crack if they dry out too quickly, so archaeologists use spray bottles of water to keep the bones wet and to help remove adhered peat. If you want to learn more and read more and see more about the Wendover bog burials, be sure to click on some of the links that I've provided for you in the show notes. There is an amazing long-form interview with Doran, Dr. Doran, about what it was like to excavate that site. And he is in the midst of excavating a different landlocked site in Texas. And he talks about the challenges and also the way that these technologies have evolved. It's very fascinating. So check out the links in the show notes. Titusville, which you know well, thanks to my TED Talk on the Wendover bog burials, was named after a colonel who won a card game. And in 1895, the entire town burned down. I found this from spacecoastdaily.com. Like so many other small towns, Titusville's citizens since the city's founding in 1867 has banded together to protect their homes and businesses from fires. They held socials and collected subscriptions to support basic fire protection for their little town. They urged their neighbors to install lightning rods on their homes and clear their lots of overgrowth to prevent fires from starting or spreading. When Titusville was in financial crisis in 1888, the citizens of the volunteer fire department donated their fire protection fund to the town fathers to keep Titusville from financial ruin. Titusville's monetary difficulties were of short duration, and the town continued its rapid growth. So rapidly, in fact, that in the spring of 1890, the East Coast Advocate published a letter from insurance agent Silas Wright of Deland, explaining he was unable to find insurance coverage for their building due to Titusville's rapid growth and the number of wooden buildings liable to go up in flames by the spread of a single fire. He suggested the town purchase a steam engine and organize a fire department to remedy their insurance situation. After the town of Cocoa suffered tremendous fire damage in December of that same year, the newspaper's editor urged the town of Titusville to consider some method of fire protection, proposing the erection of a 50,000-gallon water tank, running a water line in the business district, and installing fire hydrants. It was suggested that residential properties could be protected with the purchase of a hand engine and a reel of hose. He reminded the town council that the Titusville Volunteer Fire Department had come forward and tendered their funds to the city fathers when the city was in dire necessity, with the understanding that it would be returned in brighter days. The editor stated that the brighter days were here and that reorganizing the volunteer fire department and taking preventative actions should be encouraged, stating, quote, "It behooves our merchants to take early action, as we may wake up any morning and find we have deferred the matter just one day too long," end quote. That one day too long? It occurred a short 5 years later when on December 12, 1895, the majority of the business district in Titusville was destroyed by an arson fire. Titusville's central business district was concentrated between Broad Streets and Julia Street on South Washington Avenue, with buildings nestled close to each other and built of wood frame construction. The final toll from the fire was 42 buildings and outstructures destroyed, several people seriously injured, and at least one death. A serious blow to the town was also the loss of the entire contents of the town council's records up to that time, including council minutes, official record books, paper receipts, tax assessments, and property records. It would take most of the next decade to resolve property ownership and tax payment disputes. It was the heroic efforts on the part of the citizens that eventually stopped that fire in 1895. The foundation of Titusville's current fire service agency is based on this example of selfless citizens who responded to fight the fires when their community and their neighbors' lives and properties were in jeopardy. Future town councils appointed standing fire committees from among its council members. The fire committee was charged with making recommendations to the town council regarding fire protective actions. During the next 2 decades, improvements in fire prevention and response measures were undertaken across Titusville. Some of these included ordinances prohibiting vegetative overgrowth in lots, bans on the use of pressurized gasoline or kerosene lamps, annual inspections of chimney flues, demolishing buildings that constituted fire hazards, regulating fire escapes for hotels and boarding houses, and recommending changes in building construction materials from pine wood to brick. In 1901, the citizens also approved a 1-year, $2 million tax, the proceeds of which were to be placed in a fire protection fund to help purchase fire equipment supplies. The fund garnered a total amount of $213.33. Titusville's fire protection measures in the first decade of the 20th century also included the purchase of a portable water tank on wheels and lengths of hose along with a fire bell and establishing fire districts. Underground water drafting tanks were installed, and as the town's water lines were extended, these were replaced with fire hydrants. Sustaining a group of organized volunteers, however, appeared to be like trying to herd a room full of cats, and some years were more successful than others in maintaining a consistent volunteer department. By 1913, Titusville's town council approached town citizen Bert Johnson to serve as the first volunteer fire chief, formally appointed by the town council and under their direct supervision. When he accepted the position for a salary of $10 a month, he was charged with formulating rules and reforming the town's volunteer fire protection in the town. $10. And it was 1913. Here's some fun facts about the Space Coast. Did you know that the beloved TV show I Dream of Jeannie was set on the Space Coast of Florida? The show, which aired from 1965 to 1970, followed the comedic adventures of an astronaut and a magical genie. The Space Coast's association with space exploration made it the perfect backdrop for this iconic sitcom, and it remains a cherished part of the region's pop culture history. The show star, Barbara Eden, even visited the Space Coast years after the show ended to commemorate its impact on the community. The Space Coast has always been a hub for space enthusiasts, and the show helped to solidify that connection. Even today, visitors can take a tour of the Kennedy Space Center and see firsthand the place where so many historic space missions originated. It's fascinating to think that a TV show could have a lasting impact on the region's identity, but I Dream of Jeannie truly left its mark on the Space Coast. 6 more facts you probably didn't know about the Space Coast, and these come from vacationcentralflorida.com. Kennedy Space Center holds one of the largest structures in the world. By area, the Vehicle Assembly Building, standing at 526 feet tall and covering 8 acres, is quite the engineering marvel, making it the 8th largest building in the world by volume, containing some of the largest doors, yes, doors, in the world. The Kennedy Space Center is the site where Apollo 11 launched on its historic journey to the moon, forever changing the course of human history. Every manned NASA space flight since 1968 Apollo 8 mission has launched from the Kennedy Space Center, solidifying its status as the birthplace of American space exploration. The region is home to over 250 square miles of wildlife refuges, or 140,000 acres, providing sanctuary to a diverse array of plants and animal species. I hope you enjoyed our trek along the Atlantic coast of Florida. I can almost smell the salty air, can't you? Next week, we venture to California because we can't let Florida out-weird the West Coast, can we? Until then, thanks for listening. Stay curious. I love you.